Your violence starts from a deep fear of not being acknowledged, from not being seen or respected. Your anger hovers above your experiences like an exigent teacher ready to punish. I could feel it every time I wasn't conforming to its expectations. But mind that I said your and not you, because you are not violence nor anger. It is a program and it has a definite purpose. It is the source of trouble and pain in your life and the lives of those close to you. And so it is for all of us. Violence can be short, meaningless acts of anger, or it can be bursts of rage that destroy reality forever. But it is present and potential in all living beings. As it is useful for survival, it can also be used to destroy. Anger and violence act like a bodyguard that is sentient without control. You can watch yourself acting it out, not being able to stop, horrified, and only when its energy depletes do you take in the aftermath of its manifestation. Or you deny it, you run, you hide, you twist it into a downward spiraling fall. The event doesn't remain as it happened, a new story about it emerges. It can be a story meant to mend, to help evolve, or a story meant to hide, twist, and deceive. It is like a child who turned angry, and instead of lifting them into the light, facing them with the consequences, and thus educating and elevating them, the child is punished and hidden in a dark room, only to grow and accumulate more anger, becoming more powerful every time they finally emerge. Anger and even violence are instruments for peace, as they are instruments of war, but it is not necessary for them to manifest. Defense does not only repel, it also signals, shaping the space around it and the way others respond. A strongly muscled man gets challenged more than a slim fit man. What was built to protect is also meant to be met, tested, and sometimes resisted, naturally heading toward becoming even stronger, reaching toward indestructibility, but never achieving it, for there will always be stronger forces. Bringing the child into the light might be the only way to evolve from uncontrollable fury to educated control. The proverbial child hungers for love and is a vessel for wisdom to grow, and it might be the only way for a consciousness lacking fear and shame toward a good and progressive life of meaningful relationships and achievements. There is no grand moment of transformation, no warning bell that gives you time to prepare. It happens in the middle of life, mid-sentence, mid-glance, mid-breath, when something lands wrong. A word, a tone, a look that feels like dismissal, like disrespect, like erasure. And the shift begins, not as a thought, but as a movement in the body, faster than language, older than reason. The chest tightens, the jaw sets, the world narrows into a single point of tension, and already the story's forming. They shouldn't have. This always happens, I need to respond. This is the edge, this is where awareness is usually lost. Not because you are weak, but because the speed is overwhelming and the program is practiced. So what interrupts it? Not a belief, not a moral rule, not the idea that I should stay calm, those arrive too late. The interruption is physical, immediate, almost crude. A pause that is not elegant, a breath that is not deep or controlled. Just noticed. The simplest act. You do not move for a fraction longer than you usually would. You don't speak, yet. You don't react, yet. And inside that fraction, something is named. Not out loud, not poetically, but bluntly. This is anger. This is the surge. Not I am angry, but this is happening. That small separation is not philosophy. It is space. And into that space, the child becomes visible. Not as an image, not as a memory, but as a raw impulse. I am about to be unseen again. I am about to lose. I need to protect. This is where the old pattern demands action. Raise the voice, cut the other down, withdraw, twist the moment into something survivable. And this is where bringing the child into the light becomes real, not symbolic. You stay, not perfectly, not calmly, but deliberately. You let the heat exist in the body without giving it direction. You feel the pressure to act, and you do not obey it immediately. It feels wrong. It feels like you are failing to defend yourself, like you are letting something slip, but you are not. You are witnessing. And then something small, almost invisible. You acknowledge the child directly, not with words spoken outward, but with a shift inward. I see why this hurts. I see what this is touching. No analysis, no digging into the past, just recognition. And often that alone changes the trajectory. Not always. Sometimes the reaction still comes, but softer, slower, less absolute. Sometimes you still speak sharply, but you hear it as it leaves you, not only after. Sometimes you catch it 1 second earlier than last time. And that 1 second is everything. Because this is not about never reacting. It is about shortening the distance between reaction and awareness until they begin to overlap, until one day they are not separate events. The collapse into reaction is interrupted not by force, but by familiarity. You begin to recognize the doorway as you are stepping through it, and once seen clearly enough times, it stops being a doorway you fall through and becomes one you can choose to enter, or not. This is the practice, unimpressive, repetitive, often messy. But this is how the child is brought out of the dark in real time, not by waiting for silence and reflection, but by meeting it in the exact moment it believes it must scream to exist. Because what is not seen does not disappear. It governs from beneath the surface, from behind the eyes, from within the body that reacts before it understands. And so the life built on avoidance becomes fragile, dependent on circumstances remaining favourable, on others behaving correctly, on the world not touching the wound too directly. But the world is not careful. It does not negotiate with what we refuse to face. And so the same moments return, different faces, different voices, but the same fracture underneath, until the child is met, not once, not as a revelation, but again and again, in the ordinary moments where irritation seems justified, where anger feels righteous, where reaction feels deserved. This is where the work either deepens or dissolves into old patterns, because to bring the child into the light is not to excuse it, not to let it rule, not to shape reality around its wounds. It is to include it without surrendering to it, to let it speak without letting it decide. And this is where control transforms. It is no longer suppression, a rigid force holding something dangerous down, nor is it expression without direction, a release that leaves damage behind. It becomes something quieter, more precise, a form of authorship. You begin to choose, not what arises, but what is done with what arises. Anger may still come, intensity may still surge, but it is no longer blind. It becomes informed by awareness, by memory that is no longer distorted, by a presence that does not abandon itself in the moment of heat. And in that, something unexpected grows. Trust. Not the fragile trust that depends on others never crossing a line, but a deeper one, that even when something is touched, even when the child is stirred, you will not disappear into it. You will remain. And from that, relationships change because they are no longer arenas of unconscious repetition, but spaces where something new can actually occur. Conflict becomes less about winning or defending, and more about revealing, adjusting, understanding. Not perfectly, not always successfully, but differently enough that the past no longer dictates every outcome. This is the quiet evolution, not the removal of anger, but its integration. Not the destruction of the child, but its education. And in that, the same force that once fractured reality becomes capable of shaping it, with clarity, with restraint, with intention. Not as a weapon, but as a tool in the hands of something finally aware.